The frozen wind cut through the empty wilderness like a knife through tender flesh, and Zachary Donovan saw her stumbling through the white curtain of falling snow, just as his horse nearly trampled her into the frozen ground. He pulled hard on the reins, his breath catching in his throat, as the woman collapsed face first into a drift, not 3 feet from where his mount reared and snorted clouds of vapor into the bitter December air. The year was 1883, and in all his 26 years working cattle and living rough in the Washington Territory, Zachary had never seen anyone look so utterly lost. He swung down from his saddle before his boots hit the ground running, his heavy coat flapping behind him as he reached the motionless figure. She wore nothing but a thin cotton dress, now soaked through and frozen stiff in places, her bare feet already turning an alarming shade of blue. Dark hair clung to her face in icy strands, and when he turned her over with careful hands, he saw lips nearly purple with cold and skin so pale it seemed translucent. "Madam, can you hear me?" His voice came out rougher than intended, panic making his chest tight. He had to get her warm and fast, or she would not survive another hour in this weather. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing confused hazel eyes that stared up at him without recognition or understanding. Her lips moved, forming words that made no sound, and then her eyes rolled back as consciousness left her again. Zachary did not waste another second. He stripped off his heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her shivering form, then lifted her into his arms. She weighed hardly anything, and that worried him more than he wanted to admit. He secured her across his saddle, climbed up behind her, and spurred his horse toward his ranch house, which lay another 2 miles east through the driving snow. The ride felt like it took hours, though his pocket watch later told him it had been less than 30 minutes. He kept one arm wrapped tight around the woman, trying to share what warmth he had, while urging his horse faster through the deepening drifts. The storm had come up sudden that afternoon, catching him on his way back from checking his northern fence line. If he had been even 10 minutes later on that trail, he would never have found her, and she would have frozen to death alone in the wilderness. His ranch house finally materialized through the white curtain of snow, a solid structure of timber and stone that he had built with his own hands over the past 5 years. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant the fire he had banked that morning still burned. Thank God for small mercies. He dismounted in a single fluid motion, pulling the woman down with him, and kicked open his front door. The warmth inside hit him like a wall, and he carried her straight to the hearth, where orange flames crackled and danced. He laid her down on the braided rug in front of the fire and began the urgent work of saving her life. Her dress had frozen to her skin in places, and he had to be careful as he peeled the fabric away. He tried to maintain what modesty he could, averting his eyes as much as possible while wrapping her in every blanket he owned. Her feet concerned him most. The flesh had gone waxy and white with frostbite, and he knew from hard experience that she might lose toes if he did not act quickly. He heated water on his stove, testing it with his elbow until it reached the body temperature, then carefully submerged her feet in the basin. She moaned at the touch, her body jerking, but did not wake. He rubbed her hands between his own, trying to restore circulation, then tucked more blankets around her shoulders. For the next hour he worked steadily, changing the water as it cooled, massaging her frozen limbs, and monitoring her breathing. Slowly, painfully slowly, color began to return to her skin. Her lips faded from purple to pink, and her breathing deepened from shallow gasps to something more regular. Zachary finally allowed himself to sit back on his heels and draw a full breath. She would live. Probably. He had done everything he knew how to do, and now it was up to her constitution and whatever higher power watched over fools and lost women in snowstorms. He studied her face properly for the first time. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with delicate features that suggested she had not lived the hard frontier life he knew. Her hands, now wrapped in soft cloths, showed no calluses or roughness. This was no rancher's wife or farmer's daughter. So, what in God's name had she been doing wandering barefoot through a blizzard in the middle of nowhere? As if sensing his scrutiny, her eyes opened. She stared up at him for a long moment, her gaze unfocused and confused. Then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Where am I?" "You are safe," Zachary said, keeping his tone gentle. "I am Zachary Donovan. I found you in the snow about 2 hours ago. You were at my ranch about 5 miles south of Republic, Washington. Do you remember what happened to you?" She blinked slowly, her brow furrowing with concentration. Then something like panic flashed across her face. "I do not know. I cannot remember anything." "What is your name?" The panic intensified. Her breathing quickened, and she tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her weakness. "I do not know. I do not know my name. I cannot remember. Why cannot I remember?" Zachary placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Easy now. You are safe here. You were half frozen when I found you. Maybe your memory will come back once you have had some rest and warm food." Tears welled in her eyes. "I do not remember anything. Not my name, not where I came from, not how I got here. There is just nothing." He had heard of such things, though he had never witnessed it himself. Sometimes a blow to the head or a terrible shock could steal a person's memories. He gently examined her scalp, feeling for injuries, and found a nasty lump on the back of her head, hidden beneath her thick hair. "You have a significant bump here," he said. "You must have hit your head hard. That could explain the memory loss." She raised a trembling hand to touch the spot he indicated, wincing at the tenderness. "Will it come back?" "I honestly do not know," Zachary admitted. "I am a cattleman, not a doctor. But you need rest and care right now. We can worry about your memory once you are properly recovered." She looked around the room, taking in the simple but solid furnishings, the fire crackling in the hearth, the shelves lined with books and supplies. "You live here alone?" "I do. Have for the past 5 years since I built this place." He stood and moved to his kitchen area. "Let me get you some broth. You need something warm inside you." He ladled soup from the pot he kept simmering on his stove, a habit born from living alone and needing quick meals. When he brought it to her, she tried to hold the bowl herself, but her hands shook too badly. Without comment, he knelt beside her and spooned the broth to her lips, waiting patiently as she swallowed each small sip. "Thank you," she whispered when she had managed half the bowl. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have done the same." "I am not so certain of that." She studied his face with those hazel eyes that seemed to see more than he was comfortable with. "You are a good man, Zachary Donovan." He felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the fire. "You should rest now. We can talk more in the morning." "What should I call myself?" The question came out small and lost. "If I do not remember my name?" Zachary thought for a moment. She needed something to hold on to, some identity to anchor herself. "Your initials are FC," he said, surprising himself. "I saw them embroidered on your dress collar. Perhaps those letters will mean something when your memory returns." She touched the collar of the dress, now draped near the fire, to dry. "FC," she repeated softly. "Faith. Could that be my name? Faith?" "It could be," Zachary said gently. "And it is as good a name as any until you remember your real one." "Faith," she said again, testing it on her tongue. "All right then. Faith." He helped her settle more comfortably on the pile of blankets he had arranged, then retreated to his own bed on the other side of the room. But sleep eluded him for hours as he listened to her breathing and wondered what circumstances had brought this mysterious woman into his life on a frozen December evening. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through windows still coated with frost on the inside. The storm had passed in the night, leaving behind a world transformed into white silence. Zachary rose and built up the fire, then checked on his unexpected guest. Faith still slept, her face peaceful now, instead of pinched with cold and fear. The color had returned fully to her cheeks, and when he checked her feet, he was relieved to see that, while they remained tender and swollen, the frostbite appeared superficial. She would keep all her toes. He was making coffee when she stirred and opened her eyes. For a moment, confusion crossed her face. Then memory of the previous night settled in, and her expression turned sad. "Good morning," Zachary said. "How do you feel?" "Warm," she said, "and sore everywhere. My head aches terribly." "That is to be expected." He brought her coffee and more broth, along with some bread he had baked 2 days prior. "Do you remember anything new?" She closed her eyes, concentrating, then shook her head. "Nothing. It is all just blank, like trying to see through fog." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Then Faith said, "I cannot stay here forever. I must be from somewhere. Someone must be looking for me. The nearest town is Republic, but it is just a mining settlement, rough and small. The closest real city would be Spokane Falls, about 80 miles east. When the weather clears enough, I can take you there and we can inquire about missing persons. How long will that be? Zachary looked out the window at the deep snow. Could be a week or more before the roads are passable. These storms can shut down travel for days at a time. He saw the worry cross her face and added, "You are welcome to stay here as long as needed. I have plenty of supplies, and the company will be nice, truth be told. It gets lonely out here in winter." "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," he said firmly. "You are someone who needs help, and I am able to provide it. That is the end of that discussion." Over the following days, they settled into an unexpected routine. Zachary went about his daily chores, feeding his small herd of cattle that he kept close to the barn during winter, tending his horses, splitting wood, and maintaining the ranch. Faith recovered her strength gradually, though her memory remained stubbornly absent. She proved to be helpful, despite her circumstances. Once she could walk without pain, she insisted on contributing to the household. She cooked meals that put his simple fare to shame, mended his worn clothing with skill that spoke of experience her conscious mind could not recall, and kept the house tidier than it had been in years. They talked for hours in the evenings, sitting by the fire while snow piled higher outside. Faith asked him about his life, and Zachary found himself sharing stories he had not told anyone in years. "I came west from Ohio when I was 17, he said one night, watching flames dance in the hearth. "My father died when I was young, and my mother remarried a man who made it clear I was not welcome. So I lit out on my own, worked cattle drives, saved my money, and eventually bought this land." "Do you miss Ohio? Your mother?" "My mother passed 5 years ago. I got word through a letter from a cousin. As for Ohio itself, no. I do not miss it. This is my home now, this wild, beautiful, difficult land." He gestured out the window at the moonlit snow. "It is hard work, and lonely sometimes, but it is mine. I built this with my own hands, and no one can take it from me." Faith smiled, and he noticed how it transformed her face, making her eyes light up. "I can hear the pride in your voice when you talk about this place. You love it here." "I do," he admitted. "What about you? What do you love? What makes you happy?" She thought for a moment, then said, "I do not know about before, but right now I love sitting here by this fire, safe and warm, talking with you. I love the way the snow sparkles in the moonlight. I love the smell of fresh bread baking. Are those new loves or old ones? I cannot tell." "Maybe it does not matter," Zachary said. "Maybe what matters is how you feel right now, in this moment." Something passed between them then, something warm and unspoken that made his heart beat faster. He looked away, suddenly aware of how close they sat, how the firelight painted gold highlights in her dark hair, how her presence had transformed his lonely house into something that felt like a home. The days turned into a week, then 2. The snow continued falling intermittently, and the roads remained impassable. Zachary found he did not mind the extended isolation as much as he should have. Having Faith there changed everything. The house felt alive with her presence, filled with the sound of her humming as she worked, her laughter when he told a particularly bad joke, her thoughtful questions about everything she observed. She was curious about the world, asking him to explain things that most people took for granted. He realized that without her memories, everything was new to her. She looked at the world with fresh eyes, finding wonder in ordinary things. "Why do you have so many books?" she asked one snowy afternoon, running her fingers along his shelves. "I taught myself to read properly when I was 20, Zachary said. "A school teacher in Montana took pity on me and gave me lessons in exchange for work around her property. Once I discovered books, I could not get enough. I order them from catalogs, trade for them in town, buy them whenever I can. They keep me company. Will you read to me?" So he did, choosing a volume of poetry, and they spent the afternoon with her, curled in the chair by the fire, while he read aloud. He found himself watching her face as much as the pages, seeing her reactions to the words, the way her expression shifted with the emotions of each poem. When he finished, she said quietly, "I think I like poetry. At least, I like the way you read it." Their eyes met, and something shifted again, that same warm current that seemed to flow between them more frequently now. Zachary cleared his throat and stood, suddenly needing distance. "I should check on the animals." He bundled up and went out into the cold, but even the frigid air could not cool the warmth he felt spreading through his chest. He was developing feelings for this woman, this beautiful, mysterious stranger who had appeared in his life like something out of a dream. It was foolish and dangerous and completely inappropriate given the circumstances. She did not even know who she really was. She might be married, might have a family waiting for her somewhere, might be engaged to another man. But when he came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, and saw her smile at his return, he could not help smiling back. Whatever the future held, for now she was here, and he was grateful for every moment. That night, the wind picked up again, howling around the house with a ferocity that made the walls creak. Faith looked worried as she peered out the window into the darkness. "That sounds terrible," she said. "It is just wind," Zachary assured her. "The house has weathered worse. We are safe here." But as the night deepened, the storm intensified. Snow drove sideways past the windows, and the wind screamed like a living thing. Faith moved closer to the fire, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I have never been in a storm like this," she said, then caught herself. "Or at least, I do not remember being in one." A particularly violent gust shook the house, and she flinched. Without thinking, Zachary moved to sit beside her, offering his solid presence as reassurance. "Tell me something," she said softly. "Tell me a story to take my mind off the storm." So, he told her about the time he helped drive 1,000 head of cattle from Texas to Montana, about the rivers they crossed and the challenges they faced, about the wild beauty of the open plains and the sense of freedom he felt under the endless sky. His voice grew animated as he talked, and Faith listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that showed how carefully she was following his tale. At some point during the story, she leaned against his shoulder, seeking comfort from the storm raging outside. Zachary hesitated only a moment before putting his arm around her, holding her close. She fit perfectly against him, and the rightness of it terrified him. "Thank you," she murmured when he finished his story. "For everything, for saving me, for giving me shelter, for treating me with such kindness. I do not know what I did to deserve it, but I am grateful." "You do not need to deserve kindness," Zachary said. "It should be freely given." She tilted her head to look up at him, and their faces were suddenly very close. He could see flecks of gold in her hazel eyes, could feel her breath warm against his cheek. Time seemed to slow, and he found himself leaning toward her, drawn by something stronger than reason. Then a crash from outside broke the spell. Zachary jerked back and stood quickly. "That sounded like the barn door. I need to check it." He fled into the storm, angry at himself for nearly crossing a line he had no right to cross. The barn door had indeed blown open, and it took him 20 minutes of hard work in the driving snow to secure it properly. By the time he returned to the house, soaked and shivering, his emotions were back under control. Faith helped him out of his wet coat, her hands gentle and concerned. "You are frozen through. Come sit by the fire." She made him hot coffee and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, fussing over him the way he had fussed over her that first night. Their eyes met over the coffee cup, and Zachary saw his own confused feelings reflected back at him. "Faith," he began, not knowing what he wanted to say. "I know," she interrupted softly. "I feel it too, whatever it is." "You might have a husband somewhere," Zachary said, forcing himself to voice the fear that haunted him. "Children, a family looking for you." "I know that too," she said. "But I do not feel married. Does that make sense? Surely I would feel something, some sense of wrongness, if I were betraying vows by having these feelings for you." "Memory does not work that way. The mind does not always hold on to what the heart knows." "Then what do we do?" Zachary set down his coffee cup and took her hands in his. "We wait. We are patient. When the weather clears, we will go to Spokane Falls and find out who you are. Then we will know what to do." She nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. "And if I am married? Then I will be glad I got to know you, and I will treasure these weeks as a gift, and I will help you get back to your family." "And if I am not?" He allowed himself to cup her cheek with his hand, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "Then we will figure it out together, but not before we know for certain. I will not build something on a foundation that might crumble." "You are a good man, Zachary Donovan," she whispered. "I am trying to be," he said. They maintained a careful distance after that night, both aware of the feelings growing between them, but determined not to act on them until they knew the truth of Faith's identity. It made for a sweet torture, being so close, yet forcing themselves apart. Christmas came and went quietly. Zachary cut a small pine tree and set it up in the house, and Faith made decorations from scraps of cloth and paper. They cooked a special meal together, and Zachary produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving, sharing a small glass each to toast the holiday. "Merry Christmas, Faith," he said, raising his glass. "Merry Christmas, Zachary," she replied. "Thank you for making this bearable. If I had to lose my memory and nearly freeze to death, I am glad it led me to you." He smiled despite himself. "That is a strange thing to be thankful for." "Perhaps, but I mean it nonetheless." As January arrived, the weather finally began to break. The storms became less frequent, and the sun emerged more often from behind the clouds. Zachary knew they would soon be able to make the journey to Spokane Falls, and the knowledge filled him with dread. Once they reached civilization, everything would change. Faith would discover who she really was, and she would either return to her old life or begin a new one. Either way, these quiet, intimate weeks they had shared would be over. Faith seemed to feel the same reluctance. She grew quiet as the weather improved, often staring out the window with a distant expression. "Are you afraid?" Zachary asked her one morning. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I do not like who I really am? What if the life I had before is not one I want to return to?" "Then you do not have to," Zachary said. "People reinvent themselves out here all the time. The West is full of folks running from their pasts, creating new futures." "Is that what you did?" "In a way, I left behind a life that did not fit me and built one that does." She turned to face him fully. "Zachary, before we go, I need to tell you something. No matter what we discover in Spokane Falls, these weeks with you have been precious to me. You have shown me kindness and respect and patience. You have made me feel safe and valued. Whatever happens, I want you to know that." His throat felt tight. "Faith, please, let me finish." She moved closer, her eyes bright with emotion. "I am falling in love with you. I know I should not say it. No, we agreed to wait, but I cannot go to Spokane Falls without you knowing the truth. If I am married, if I have another life waiting, I will honor that. But I will also carry my love for you in my heart forever." Zachary's careful control shattered. He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "I love you too," he said roughly. "God help me. I have tried not to, but I cannot stop it. You have become everything to me." She tilted her face up to his, and this time neither of them pulled away. Their lips met in a kiss that was tender and desperate all at once. Months of restrained longing finally finding release. Zachary poured everything he felt into that kiss, knowing it might be their only one, knowing that tomorrow they would begin the journey that might tear them apart forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Faith rested her forehead against his. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we will have had this moment." "I will fight for you," Zachary said fiercely. "If there is any way we can be together, I will find it. I promise you that." They spent their last evening at the ranch wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly about hopes and fears, making promises they might not be able to keep, but needing to make them anyway. Zachary memorized everything about her, the way her hair caught the firelight, the sound of her laugh, the feel of her hand in his. If this was all they would ever have, he wanted to remember every detail. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Zachary prepared his wagon and horses, while Faith dressed in warm clothes he had modified to fit her properly. She wore her original dress underneath, the one with the embroidered initials FC, hoping it might trigger some memory or recognition. The journey to Spokane Falls would take 3 days under good conditions, and they would need to camp along the way. Zachary packed supplies carefully, including plenty of blankets and food. He also packed his rifle, knowing the roads could be dangerous. They set out just after sunrise, the wagon crunching through the snow-covered road. Faith sat beside him on the bench, and despite the anxiety about what lay ahead, Zachary felt a sense of rightness having her there. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The first day of travel passed uneventfully. They made good time on the main road, which had been packed down by previous travelers. Zachary pointed out landmarks and told Faith about the surrounding country, keeping the conversation light to distract them both from worrying about the future. That night, they camped in a sheltered spot off the road, and Zachary built a fire while Faith prepared a simple meal from their supplies. They ate quietly, then sat close together for warmth as stars emerged overhead. "Look," Faith said, pointing up. "The stars are so bright out here." "Not much light to compete with," Zachary said. "That is one of the things I love about living out here. You can see the sky properly. Tell me their names, the stars and constellations." So he did, pointing out the patterns he had learned during long nights on cattle drives. Faith listened with her head resting on his shoulder, and Zachary wished they could stay frozen in this moment forever, before reality intruded to tear them apart. The second day brought clouds and the threat of more snow, but the weather held. They passed through a small settlement called Wilbur, where Zachary bought fresh supplies and asked if anyone had heard of a missing woman. No one had, which was both relieving and worrying. Relieving because it meant perhaps Faith was not married after all. Worrying because it meant they still had no leads about her identity. That night, sharing their second camp, Faith said, "What if we do not find any answers in Spokane Falls? What if no one knows who I am?" "Then you get to choose who you want to be," Zachary said, "and where you want to go from here. Would I be able to stay with you, at your ranch?" His heart leaped at the question, but he forced himself to be practical. "Faith, if you stay, people will talk. A single woman living with a single man, unmarried. I do not care much what people think, but you might." "I care more about being with you than about gossip," she said firmly. "But if it would hurt your reputation, your business, then I would not want that." "Or we could get married," Zachary said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "If we do not find any evidence that you already have a husband, I mean. I know this is fast and strange circumstances, but Faith, I love you. I want you in my life. If marriage is what it takes to make that possible, then I am asking." She stared at him, eyes wide. "Zachary Donovan, are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am. Not very romantically, but yes." "Will you marry me, Faith? Will you take a chance on a simple cattleman who loves you more than he thought possible?" Tears streamed down her face, catching the firelight. "Yes," she said. "Yes, if I am free to marry you, I will. Gladly." They sealed the promise with a kiss that warmed them better than any fire could. Then they held each other close, both knowing they were making plans that might crumble come tomorrow, but unable to stop themselves from hoping. Spokane Falls materialized through the gray winter morning like a promise and a threat. The city had grown considerably since Zachary's last visit, spreading along the Spokane River with new buildings rising seemingly every month. The sound of construction competed with the roar of the falls themselves, creating a cacophony that felt jarring after weeks of quiet isolation. Zachary guided the wagon through increasingly busy streets, aware of Faith tensing beside him. She stared at everything with wide eyes, as if hoping something would trigger a memory. "Anything familiar?" he asked gently. "No," she said. "It all feels strange and new." They found lodging at a respectable hotel, taking separate rooms, despite both wishing otherwise. Zachary wanted to do this properly, wanted to honor Faith regardless of what they discovered. That afternoon, they began their search. The local newspaper office seemed like the logical starting point. The editor, a sharp-eyed man named Patterson, listened to their story with growing interest. "A woman with no memory, you say? And you found her wandering in a snowstorm near Republic?" Patterson pulled out a ledger and began flipping through pages. "Let me check our reports from December. If anyone reported a woman missing, we would have printed it." He searched for 20 minutes while Zachary and Faith waited anxiously. Finally, Patterson looked up and shook his head. "Nothing. No missing woman reports from anywhere in the territory during December." "What about other nearby territories or states?" Zachary asked. "I can send telegrams to newspapers in Idaho, Montana, and Oregon, asking them to check their records. But that will take time, and honestly, if no one has reported her missing by now, it is possible no one is looking." The words should have been comforting, but they only deepened the mystery. How could a woman simply disappear without anyone searching for her? Their next stop was the Territorial Marshal's office. Marshal Hendricks, a weathered man with kind eyes, listened to their story and examined Faith carefully. "You do look vaguely familiar," he said slowly, "but I cannot place where I might have seen you. Let me check through our notices." He pulled out a stack of wanted posters and missing person reports, spreading them across his desk. Faith looked through each one, but none sparked any recognition. Hendricks studied her face thoughtfully. "There was a stagecoach robbery back in November," he said finally. Happened on the road between here and Coeur d'Alene. Several passengers were killed, and one woman's body was never recovered. We assumed she was taken by the robbers or died in the wilderness. Could that have been you? Faith's face went pale. I might have been on that coach. The passenger manifest listed a woman named Frances Coleman, traveling from Portland to Spokane Falls. She was in her 20s, dark hair, traveling alone. That is all we know about her. Frances Coleman, FC, the initials on Faith's dress collar. Zachary felt his heart sink, even as pieces began falling into place. Do you know anything else about this Frances Coleman? Was she married? Where was she going? Hendricks consulted his notes. According to the stage line records, she was unmarried. She had purchased a ticket to Spokane Falls, but did not list a final destination. No family has inquired about her, which is strange. Usually someone comes looking. Faith's hand found Zachary's and squeezed tight. So, I might be Frances Coleman, and I survived a stage robbery. It would explain your memory loss, Hendricks said. Head injuries from accidents often cause such things. It would also explain why you were wandering lost in the snow. If you escaped or were abandoned by the robbers, you could have been walking for days trying to find help. What happened to the robbers? Zachary asked. Oh, still at large. We have pauses searching, but they disappeared into the mountains. They killed 3 people during that robbery, including the driver and guard. If this young lady witnessed it, she is fortunate to be alive. They left the marshal's office in a daze. Faith, or Frances, seemed overwhelmed by the information. Zachary guided her to a quiet restaurant, and they sat in a corner booth while she tried to process everything. Frances Coleman, she said, testing the name. It does not feel like mine, but then nothing does. The initials match, Zachary pointed out, and the timing fits. If the robbery was in November and I found you in December, you could have been wandering for weeks. How did I survive that long? I do not know. Maybe you found shelter along the way. Maybe you stumbled from homestead to homestead. Your mind might have blocked out the trauma of what you experienced. She looked at him with frightened eyes. If I saw people murdered, if I was taken by killers, what if I remember? What if those memories come back? Zachary reached across the table and took both her hands in his. Then we will face them together. You are not alone, Frances, or Faith. Whichever name you choose, you have me. Frances, she said slowly, my name is Frances Coleman. I should try to reclaim it, should I not? Try to remember who I was? Only if you want to, Zachary said. There is no requirement to become someone you were before trauma changed you. They spent the next 2 days following up on leads. Zachary visited the stage line office and learned that Frances Coleman had boarded in Portland with a small trunk, which had been lost in the robbery. The clerk remembered her vaguely as quiet and polite, but knew nothing else about her. A telegram to the Portland newspaper yielded more information. Frances Coleman had been a seamstress there, living in a boarding house, no family listed. Her landlady reported that she had given notice she was leaving, but did not say why or where she was going beyond making a new start somewhere. So, Frances had been running from something, or to something, when the robbery occurred. She had no family, no husband, no one who would miss her. In a way, it was the best possible news. It meant she was free. Free to choose her own path, free to be with Zachary without guilt or complication. But it also meant she had been terribly alone in the world before he found her. The thought made Zachary's chest ache. This brave woman who had survived so much had been facing the world with no one to support her. Well, not anymore. She had him now, if she still wanted him. On their last evening in Spokane Falls, they walked along the river together, watching the falls thunder over the rocks in the fading light. Frances, as she was trying to think of herself now, leaned against Zachary's arm. So now we know, she said. I am Frances Coleman, former seamstress from Portland, survivor of a robbery, owner of no possessions and no family. What do I do with that information? Whatever you want, Zachary said. You could stay here in Spokane Falls and start over. The city is growing, and a skilled seamstress could make a good living. Or you could return to Portland if you wanted to try reclaiming your old life. Or I could marry a cattleman and live on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. She looked up at him with a small smile. That option is still available, Zachary said, his heart pounding. If you want it. I know this is not what you expected when you left Portland. I am not wealthy, and ranch life is hard work. But I love you, Francis. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy if you will let me." She turned to face him fully, placing her hands on his chest. "Zachary Donovan, I may not remember my life before you, but I know my life with you is what I want. Yes, I will marry you. I will go to your ranch and learn to be a rancher's wife, and I will count myself lucky every day that I wandered into that snowstorm and you found me." He kissed her there beside the falls, with the sound of rushing water drowning out the rest of the world, and felt something settle deep in his soul. This was right. This was meant to be. They were married 3 days later, in a simple ceremony at a church in Spokane Falls. Zachary bought Frances a simple gold band, and she wore a dress he purchased for her, pale blue with lace at the collar. The minister who married them was a kindly older man who did not ask too many questions about their whirlwind courtship. The hotel owner and his wife served as witnesses, both seeming genuinely happy for the young couple. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed his bride with a feeling of joy so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. Frances Coleman Donovan smiled up at him with tears in her eyes, and he knew she felt the same. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, finally able to be together properly as husband and wife. Zachary was gentle with Frances, aware that she had been through trauma, even if she could not remember it. She came to him with trust and love, and he cherished her with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes. "I love you," she whispered as they lay tangled together afterward. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." "Thank you for trusting me," Zachary replied, stroking her hair. "For taking a chance on a stranger. You have made me happier than I knew was possible." The journey back to the ranch felt entirely different from the anxious trip to Spokane Falls. Now they traveled as husband and wife, with no secrets between them and a future stretching bright before them. Frances peppered Zachary with questions about the ranch, about cattle, about what her life would be like. "I will teach you everything," Zachary promised. "You do not need to be an expert right away. We will learn together." When the ranch house finally came into view through the winter landscape, Frances gasped. "It is beautiful. Our home." Their home. Zachary loved the sound of that. He helped Frances down from the wagon and lifted her in his arms to carry her across the threshold, both of them laughing. Inside, the house was cold from having been empty for over a week, but Zachary quickly built up the fire while Frances explored the space with new eyes. "I remember being here before," she said, "but it feels different now. Now it is really mine too." "It always was," Zachary said, "from the moment I brought you through the door." They settled back into life at the ranch, but everything had changed. Now they worked together as partners, building their future side by side. Frances proved to be a quick learner, mastering the skills of ranch life with determination. She learned to milk their cow, tend the chickens Zachary bought for her, help with feeding cattle, and all the 1,000 small tasks that kept a homestead running. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing new life to the land. Frances planted a garden, her hands remembering skills her mind had forgotten. She sewed new curtains for the windows and slowly made the house feel more like a home. Marshal Hendricks sent word in March that the stagecoach robbers had been caught and would hang for their crimes. He asked if Frances wanted to come testify, but Zachary wrote back saying she still had no memory of the incident and a court appearance would serve no purpose. Frances felt relieved when Zachary told her. She had no desire to dredge up a past she could not remember. Her life was here now, with Zachary, building something new. As the months passed, Frances's memories did not return, but she found she did not mind as much as she once had. She created new memories every day, better ones, filled with love and purpose and belonging. One evening in early summer, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Frances said, "I think I am with child." Zachary's head snapped around to stare at her. "Truly?" She nodded, smiling through sudden tears. "I believe so. The signs are there." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, overwhelmed with emotion. "A baby. Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Zachary said. "Frances, you have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A wife, a partner, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," she said softly. We found each other against all odds. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Frances bloomed with health, and Zachary hovered over her protectively, making her laugh with his constant concern. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, fresh trout from the stream, anything he thought might please her. In November, exactly 1 year after the stage robbery that had stolen her memory, Frances went into labor. Zachary rode hard to fetch the midwife from Republic, then paced anxiously while the woman attended to his wife. The hours dragged like years, but finally, just as dawn broke over the mountains, a baby's cry filled the air. The midwife emerged with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Donovan, a healthy boy, and your wife is doing well." Zachary rushed to Frances's side. She lay exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. When she pulled back the cloth to show him their son, Zachary felt his heart expand beyond capacity. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered, touching one tiny hand with a gentle finger. "We should name him," Frances said. "What would you like to call him?" Zachary thought for a moment. "What about James, after my father, James Donovan?" "James," Frances repeated, smiling down at their son. "I think that is perfect. Hello, James. Welcome to your home." Life settled into a new rhythm with baby James. The days were exhausting, but filled with joy. Zachary marveled at how naturally Frances took to motherhood, soothing the baby when he cried, nursing him with patience, singing soft lullabies that made Zachary wonder if she remembered them from her own childhood. One night, when James was 6 months old and finally sleeping through the night, Zachary and Frances sat together by the fire. James slept peacefully in the cradle Zachary had built, and the house was quiet except for the crackling flames. "Do you ever wish you could remember?" Zachary asked softly. "Your life before?" Frances thought for a moment. "Sometimes I am curious," she admitted. "But no, I do not wish for those memories. Everything that matters to me began when you found me in that snowstorm. My real life started then. Whatever came before is just prologue." "You have become quite philosophical," Zachary teased gently. "I have had a good teacher." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You have taught me so much, Zachary, about love, about strength, about building a life worth living. I am the woman I am because of you." "I think you always had that strength inside you," Zachary said. "You survived a robbery, weeks in the wilderness, nearly freezing to death. You did that on your own before I came along. I just gave you a safe place to heal. You gave me much more than that. You gave me yourself." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 1.5 years ago, they had been strangers. Now they were husband and wife, parents to a beautiful son, partners in every sense of the word. As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Zachary and Frances worked hard, expanding their herd and improving their land. They built an addition onto the house, adding more rooms for the family they hoped to grow. James thrived, becoming a bright, curious child who followed his father everywhere and clearly adored his mother. When James was 3, Frances gave birth again, this time to a daughter they named Sarah. The little girl had her mother's hazel eyes and her father's determined chin. James was enchanted with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from feeding to diaper changes. More children followed over the years. Another son, Thomas, who arrived when Sarah was 2. Then twin daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, who surprised everyone and kept Frances busy chasing after 2 identical bundles of energy. Finally, when Frances was 30, a last son they named Samuel. The house that had once seemed large for a solitary man now rang with the sounds of family, children laughing and arguing, playing and learning. Frances taught them to read and write, using the books from Zachary's shelves. Zachary taught them about the land, about caring for animals, about the value of hard work and honest dealing. Republic grew over the years from a small mining camp into a proper town. New families arrived, and the Donovans became respected members of the community. Frances's skill with a needle became legendary, and she often helped other women with their sewing. Zachary served on the town council, using his practical wisdom to help guide the community's growth. Sometimes visitors would ask Frances about her past, having heard the story of the mysterious woman who lost her memory. She always answered the same way. "I do not remember my life before I came here, and that is all right. My real life began in Washington with my husband and my family. Everything before that is just someone else's story. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Frances back to Spokane Falls for a proper celebration. It was the first time they had been away from the children for more than a day, and while Frances fretted about leaving them, she also appreciated the chance to be alone with her husband. They stayed at the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, and Zachary surprised her with a beautiful necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant. "It is lovely," Frances said, touching it with wonder. "But Zachary, this must have been expensive." "You are worth every penny," he said. "You have given me 10 years of happiness, 5 beautiful children, and a life richer than I ever dreamed possible. A necklace seems like a small gift in comparison." "You have given me just as much," Frances said. "You gave me my life back, even if it was a different life than the one I had before. You gave me love and family and purpose." They walked along the river again, as they had the night they got engaged, watching the falls thunder over the rocks. The city had grown even more in the past decade, but the falls remained constant, powerful, and eternal. "Do you ever regret it?" Frances asked. "Taking in a stranger? Marrying someone who could not even tell you her real name?" "Never," Zachary said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Francis Donovan. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." She kissed him there beside the falls, just as they had 10 years before, and felt the same rush of love and rightness. They had built something beautiful together, something that would last. The children grew and flourished. James became a natural cattleman like his father, taking over more of the ranch work as he got older. Sarah inherited her mother's gift with a needle and her father's head for business, already talking about opening a dress shop in town someday. Thomas loved books and learning, and Zachary started saving money to send him to college in Seattle. The twins were still young, but showed signs of their own unique personalities. Elizabeth bold and adventurous, Margaret thoughtful and gentle. Little Samuel was too young yet to show his path, but he was clearly smart and determined. Frances often thought about the woman she had been before, the Frances Coleman who had left Portland seeking a new start. In a way, she had gotten exactly what she was looking for, just not in the way she could have imagined. The stage robbery and memory loss had been terrible, traumatic, but they had also freed her from whatever past she had been running from. They had brought her to Zachary, and that made everything worthwhile. One autumn evening, when Frances was 35 and Zachary 43, they sat together on the porch after the children had gone to bed. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. "I was thinking," Frances said, "about that night you found me. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had taken a different route home? If you had been just a few minutes earlier or later?" "I try not to," Zachary admitted. "It is too frightening to contemplate. The idea that we might have missed each other entirely, that you might have frozen to death while I rode past unknowing." "But we did not miss each other," Frances said. "You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. I think that means something." "What do you think it means?" "I think some things are meant to be. I think you and I were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together." She gestured at the house behind them, where their children slept safely. All of this was meant to happen. "I like that thought," Zachary said, pulling her close. "It means that despite all the randomness and chance in the world, we were always going to end up here, together." They sat quietly, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear one of the twins stirring, then settling back to sleep. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, and cattle lowed softly in the barn. This was their life, built from the ashes of tragedy and trauma, constructed with love and patience and determination. This was what they had created together, and it was good. Years continued to pass, bringing changes both large and small. The children grew into adults, one by one, leaving the nest to forge their own paths. James took over more of the ranch operations, eventually building his own house on the property and bringing home a wife. Sarah opened her dress shop in Republic and became known throughout the region for her beautiful work. Thomas went to college as planned, then became a teacher, returning to open a school in Republic. The twins married brothers from a neighboring ranch, staying close to home. Samuel, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a deputy marshal, following in the footsteps of the man who had helped identify his mother all those years ago. Frances and Zachary watched their children's successes with pride and joy. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family tree spreading wide and deep across the Washington Territory. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. 3 generations of Donovans filled the house and spilled out onto the lawn, children running and playing, adults talking and laughing. Frances looked around at all the faces, all the love, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Zachary found her standing alone for a moment, taking it all in. He slipped his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him with the ease of 3 decades together. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about how far we have come, about that girl wandering lost in the snow, and the man who saved her, about everything we have built together." She turned to look up at him, seeing the silver in his hair, the lines on his face that matched her own. "I am thinking about how grateful I am." "I am grateful too," Zachary said, "for every day with you, for this family we created, for the life we have shared." James approached them then, his own children trailing behind him. "Mother, father, everyone wants to hear the story again, about how you met." Frances and Zachary exchanged a smile. They had told this story countless times over the years, but their children and grandchildren never tired of hearing it. So they gathered everyone around, and once again, Zachary recounted the night he had nearly trampled a woman in the snow, how he had brought her home, more dead than alive, how they had fallen in love during a hard winter. Frances added her perspective, talking about waking with no memory, about learning to trust this stranger, about choosing to build a new life rather than mourn the old one she could not remember. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they knew every word. It was their origin story, the foundation upon which all their lives rested, the tale of 2 people who found each other against impossible odds and built something lasting. As the celebration continued around them, Frances and Zachary stole another moment alone, walking down to the creek that ran through their property. The water bubbled over stones, catching the afternoon sunlight, and cottonwood trees rustled overhead. "Do you have any regrets?" Frances asked, looking back over everything. Zachary considered the question seriously. "I regret that you had to go through trauma to come to me. I wish you could have arrived under better circumstances. But the life we built together? I regret nothing about that, not a single moment." "Neither do I," Frances said. "Even the hard times, the struggles, they all had value. They made us who we are." They had been through much together over the years, harsh winters and drought summers, the year the fever came through and they nearly lost Thomas, the cattle rustlers who tried to steal their herd, the financial panic that almost destroyed their savings. But they had weathered every storm together, their love and partnership never wavering. "You know what I think?" Zachary said. "I think that woman who left Portland all those years ago was searching for exactly this, for a place to belong, for people to love, for a life with meaning. She got it, just not in the way she expected." "You are probably right," Frances agreed. "I like to think she would be proud of who I became, who we became." As the sun began to set on their anniversary celebration, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Frances and Zachary stood together watching their family. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all carrying forward the legacy of love they had built. This was their achievement, their gift to the world. Not wealth or fame, but family and love, and the knowledge that they had lived good lives. That night, after all the guests had departed and the house was quiet once more, Frances and Zachary prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 3 decades. They moved together with the ease of long practice, no words needed after so many years. As they settled into bed, Zachary pulled Frances close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This had been their routine for 30 years, and she never tired of it. "I love you," Zachary murmured, his lips against her hair. "I love you too," Frances replied. "Thank you for finding me all those years ago. Thank you for giving me a life." "Thank you for letting me," Zachary said, "for trusting me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me." They drifted to sleep in each other's arms, 2 people who had started as strangers and become the center of each other's world. Outside, stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss beside the falls in Spokane, the same stars that had watched over Frances as she wandered lost in the snow so long ago. Their story had begun with tragedy and trauma, with memory loss and near death. But it had transformed into something beautiful, a love story that spanned decades and created ripples that would continue long after they were gone. Their children would tell their children, and the story would live on, becoming legend in the family. The tale of the woman who was lost and the man who found her. The story of how love could heal even the deepest wounds, how trust could build something lasting, how two people could create a whole world together. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of the courage to let go of the past and embrace an uncertain future. And it was a story with a happy ending, the kind that only comes from years of hard work, dedication, and unwavering love. The kind that is earned, not given, built one day at a time through good times and bad. As the years continued to pass, Francis and Zachary grew old together gracefully. They slowed down but never stopped, still working the ranch with help from their children, still finding joy in simple pleasures. A sunrise over the mountains, the first flowers of spring, a grandchild's laughter, a quiet evening together on the porch. Francis's memory of her life before that snowstorm never returned, but it did not matter anymore. Those lost years were just shadows, insignificant compared to the bright, beautiful life she had lived since. She was Frances Coleman Donovan, wife and mother, grandmother and great-grandmother, rancher and seamstress, beloved member of her community. That was identity enough. On a clear spring morning, in their 45th year of marriage, Frances woke to find Zachary already awake, watching her with soft eyes. "Good morning," she said, smiling at him. "Good morning, my love," he replied. "I was just thinking about how beautiful you still are." She laughed, touching her gray hair. "Flatterer, we are both old now. Maybe, but you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. That has not changed since the moment I found you in the snow." "I was half frozen and unconscious," Frances protested. "Even then," Zachary insisted, "even then, I knew you were special." They rose and went about their morning routine, moving slowly but steadily. Their bodies were not what they once were, but their spirits remained strong. They had much to be grateful for, and they counted their blessings daily. That afternoon, surrounded by family, Frances and Zachary sat together on their porch, watching yet another generation of children playing in the yard. Their first great-great-grandchild had been born the month before, and Frances had held the tiny baby with wonder, marveling at how their love had created this vast network of family. "We did well," Zachary said quietly. "We did," Frances agreed. "Better than I ever could have imagined." "Do you think she knows?" Zachary asked. "That woman you used to be, Frances Coleman from Portland, do you think some part of her knows how it all turned out?" Frances thought about it, then smiled. "I think she does. I think she knows, and she is proud. We finished the journey she started when she left Portland looking for a new beginning. We gave her exactly what she was searching for." The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the world in gold and amber. Frances and Zachary sat together, hands intertwined, watching the light change. They had done this thousands of times over their years together, and it never got old. Every sunset was a gift, a reminder of another day shared, another day of love and life. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Frances looked up at them and remembered that night so long ago when Zachary had taught her their names. She still knew every constellation, still loved watching them wheel overhead through the seasons. "Zachary," she said softly, "if I had my memory back, if I could remember everything about Frances Coleman's life before you, I would not want it. This life, our life, is worth more than any memories I lost. You were worth losing everything for." Zachary's eyes grew bright with emotion. "That is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. It is the truth. You saved my life that night in the snow, but you did more than that. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me love and family and purpose. You gave me everything that matters." They kissed there under the stars, two old people who loved each other as deeply as they had when they were young. Time had changed their bodies, but not their hearts. They were still the cowboy and the lost woman, still the two people who had chosen to build a life together against all odds. That night, as they prepared for bed in the house they had shared for so many years, surrounded by photographs and mementos of the life they had built, Frances paused to look around. Every corner held a memory. Every object told a story. This house had sheltered them through births and deaths, joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. It had been their sanctuary, their haven, their home. "I would not change a thing," she said suddenly. "Neither would I," Zachary agreed. "Not a single moment." They settled into bed together, and as Frances drifted toward sleep, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the woman who had boarded a stagecoach in Portland so many years ago, seeking a fresh start. She thought about the robbery that had stolen her memory but given her freedom. She thought about the snowstorm and the cowboy who had saved her. Every step had been necessary. Every hardship had served a purpose. It had all led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this beautiful life they had created together, and that made everything worthwhile. In her dreams that night, Frances walked through the snow again, lost and alone. But this time, she was not afraid, because she knew Zachary would find her. He would always find her. That was the promise they had made to each other, not just on their wedding day, but every day since. To always find each other, to always come home to each other, to always love each other no matter what challenges life brought. And they had kept that promise for 45 years. Through every storm, through every hardship, through every joy and sorrow, they had found their way back to each other. They had built a love that could weather anything, a partnership that nothing could break. As the years continued, Frances and Zachary remained the heart of their growing family. When health issues arose, they faced them together, supporting each other through every challenge. When Zachary struggled with a bad winter cough, Frances nursed him back to health. When Frances fell and broke her wrist, Zachary tended to her with gentle hands. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by so many family members that the ranch could barely contain them all. Someone had made a family tree, and Frances marveled at all the branches spreading from the union between her and Zachary. So many lives that would not exist if she had frozen to death in that snowstorm, if Zachary had not found her. During the celebration, their grandson Thomas asked Frances to tell the story one more time. She looked at Zachary and he nodded, so together they told it again. The tale of the lost woman and the cowboy who saved her. The story that had become legend in their family. When they finished, little Sarah, their great-great-granddaughter, asked, "Did you ever remember who you were before?" Frances smiled at the child. "No, sweetheart, I never did, but I learned something important. It does not matter who you were before. What matters is who you choose to be now. I chose to be Grandma Frances, wife to Grandpa Zachary, mother to our children, grandmother to all of you, and that is the best choice I ever made." As the celebration wound down and family members began departing, Frances and Zachary once again found themselves alone on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. They were both in their 70s now, weathered by time, but still strong in spirit. "We made it," Frances said softly. 50 years. "We made it," Zachary agreed. "And if I am blessed with more time, I hope to make it 50 more." Frances laughed. "That would make us impossibly old." "Worth it to have more time with you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge. This land, this house, this life they had built. It was all any reasonable person could ask for. They had been given a gift, and they had treasured it, nurtured it, made it grow into something beautiful. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Spring brought new calves and fresh grass. Summer heated the land and filled the garden with bounty. Autumn painted the trees in gold and crimson. Winter blanketed everything in snow, and every year when the first storm came, Frances and Zachary would remember that night so long ago when their paths had crossed. They grew very old together, their bodies failing, but their love never wavering. When Zachary struggled to mount his horse, Frances was there to help. When Frances could no longer work in her garden, Zachary tended it for her, bringing her fresh vegetables and flowers. They spent more time sitting together, less time working, but they did not mind. They had earned their rest. Their children and grandchildren ran the ranch now, and they did it well, building on the foundation Frances and Zachary had laid. On a peaceful evening in early autumn, as they sat together watching the sunset for what would be the last time, Zachary turned to Frances and said, "If I could go back and live it all again, I would not change a moment." "Neither would I," Frances said, squeezing his hand. "Every moment led us here, to this beautiful life we shared. I love you, Frances Donovan. I loved you from the moment I saw you in the snow, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Zachary. You were my savior, my partner, my home. Everything good in my life came from you. They kissed one last time as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Two people who had started as strangers and become one soul, two halves of a whole that nothing could divide. Zachary passed peacefully in his sleep that night, Francis holding his hand. He was 78 years old and had lived a life full of love and purpose. Francis mourned him deeply, but she also celebrated the incredible journey they had shared. 53 years of marriage, 5 children, countless grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and a love that had never faltered. Francis lived another 2 years after Zachary's passing, staying on the ranch with her family around her. She spent her days telling stories to her great-great-grandchildren, teaching them about the man their great-great-grandfather had been, about the love they had shared, about the importance of family and kindness and perseverance. When her time came, Francis went peacefully, surrounded by family, her last words a whisper of Zachary's name. She was 80 years old, and she had lived a life beyond anything that lonely seamstress from Portland could have imagined. They buried her next to Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had built together. A simple stone marked their resting place, with words that captured their essence. Zachary and Francis Donovan, 2 souls, 1 love, forever. Their children continued the ranch, passing it down through generations. The story of the lost woman and the cowboy who saved her became part of family lore, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder of the power of love, the importance of kindness, the possibility of second chances. The house they built together still stood decades later, expanded and renovated, but still recognizable. Donovan descendants still worked the land, still raised cattle, still looked up at the same stars Zachary and Francis had watched together. And every winter, when the first snow fell, the family would gather and remember the night it all began. The night a woman wandered lost in the snow with no memory, and a cowboy took her home and helped her heal. The night that started a love story that would span generations and create a legacy of love that would never be forgotten. Their love had been extraordinary not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Built on trust and patience and dedication, it had weathered every storm and grown stronger with each passing year. It had created life and meaning and purpose, rippling outward to touch countless lives. And in the end, that was the true measure of their success. Not wealth or fame, but love. Love that healed wounds, created family, built community, and left the world better than they found it. Love that proved that even the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures, that loss could become gain, that endings could become beginnings. The woman who had lost everything in a snowstorm had gained the world. The lonely cowboy who had lived in isolation had found his home. Together, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. And so, their story ended where all the best stories end, with love triumphant, with family flourishing, with a legacy that would never die. The lost woman had been found. The cowboy had found his purpose, and together they had built a love that would echo through eternity.